Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Andy Littleton. I'm sitting across from Eric Siepen. We are from Mission Church and the Village, respectively.
Yeah.
And we talked about There are two.
This is an interesting podcast.
It's different. It's
very
different. There are two distinct sections of what you're about to hear from us.
Mm-hmm.
The first begins with us working something out. And here's, again, a moment to explain the podcast. You're sitting down at a breakfast table, even though there happen to be microphones attached, with two pastors, and you get to listen in to their conversation. That's what we say. Today, we're going to start with, we had a little something we needed to talk about, a little difference of viewpoint.
You could call it that.
An offense.
It was really good. It was a good decision to work it out. Yeah,
I liked it.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
Yeah, it was really good.
So you get to sit with us, and I think it's honestly a great part of the podcast.
Yeah.
And then from there, we are going to discuss ChatGPT. And then there's going to be a transition in which we talk about stability, which really ends up talking a lot about meals
And hospitality.
hospitality in home and church.
Yeah.
So that's, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about this, but as I said at the end of the podcast, we're looking for a social media team. Here's how it works. Just share this podcast when you see it posted on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love it to be shared 5 times. That's our goal.
Wow.
Get it shared
Join
5
the
times.
team.
Join the team. And support us. $10, $5, or $3 a month.
There you go.
Boom.
Boom. Check. All right. So we're rolling in. It's a free for all. We say we're going to talk about stability, instability, but Eric and I have to work some stuff out.
Let's work it out.
We've
First off, let's start with the coffee.
The coffee. Yeah. So Eric sends me a sermon, and you know what was the sermon about? I know what the sermon was about. It's about the coffee.
Yes.
There was something that stood out. I listened to it on my way home from Phoenix last night, and this barrel-aged coffee. What was he saying about God and faith and all that? I can't remember, but I remember coffee.
You don't remember rejoicing or contentment or anything like that.
I do.
Yeah.
And I do want to talk about it. It's good.
Well,
But
I only sent it to you because you sent me an article where you wrote about stability.
and you got into stability.
yeah, so I
and
thought, that's interesting.
I loved it. And let's go there.
Yeah,
but,
let's go.
But I will say something that stood out as I went, boy, he loves this coffee. This whiskey barrel aged amazing coffee that he's never impressed by coffee, but this time. So I thought, put my little soul, my little heart out in front of my friend. And I said, so how about some of that coffee at Faith Over Breakfast? And I get here and I say, hey, any of the coffee? And as Eric opens up his bubbly water, nope.
Well, I was in an appointment from 6 until almost 8:30, so I didn't have time to brew you a micro-brewed, whiskey barrel aged cup of coffee.
So,
but I will make sure you get some.
That sounds amazing, Eric. I mean, here's the problem. You probably need to order a 10-pound bag because your whole church is thinking the same thing as me.
Yeah.
They're all wishing. They're going, so we've got this Keurig. Thanks for the Keurig Village. But you're telling us about this whiskey barrel-aged coffee, and come on now.
They have whiskey barrel-aged Keurig pods.
Well, you can buy the Keurig pod where you put your own coffee in it.
I could have done it that way because I think we do have a few of those. Oh, man. I could have prepped that before because I did get up at 5:30, take a shower, and work out, and then I went at 6:10 to this meeting.
You're a responsible guy.
I try to
I'm
be.
impressed. Yeah.
But
You're in the mode. I'm just getting started today.
yeah, no,
I had my long day yesterday, 3:45 to 8:30 at, doing school and work. So I let myself go ahead and sleep in a tad.
3:45 in the afternoon to 8:30 is really going.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's after AM.
It's a long day.
AM. And guess what kind of coffee I was up for making at that time? Instant.
Instant coffee.
I made
Was it
instant.
Starbucks instant?
No, we've got to. I don't even know. I don't even care.
It was probably
Just
yeah.
Chuck it in the cup. Let it dissolve. Let's go.
Yeah.
Off we go.
Ooh, that's amazing.
I'm
because it was your seminary day.
It was the seminary day. Now I will don't feel too bad for me. It's spring training, so we hung in Phoenix and went to a game and then came back and did a group with the
tough day.
It was kind of a half day off, but it was long.
Right. Anyway,
here we are. So then, we give reports to our regional body of churches, the classis, and I see Eric's report, and it's an incredible report. It is clean, it is bullet pointed, it is thorough, and it is very different than what I'm used to.
Right.
And so I replied back and said, what did I say? I hurt you. I hurt you.
Well, you said something like, "Oh, I could have done a report like the Village, or something. The Village all uses ChatGPT or something sarcastic with a smiley and a wink, but just to be."
I think one of the other guys replied back, "Wow, what an amazing report!"
Right. So I've got a lot of compliments for it, and then Andy felt like he needed to undermine the compliment and say, "Well, I could have used ChatGPT to do the report." That's what it was. I feel like you didn't like the eyes just on me.
I didn't think that's what it was, but maybe.
But the honest thing is,
it was a killer report.
Whatever you wrote, it did actually hook me a little bit, as they like to say, or pushed in and it was a little hard for me.
Yeah. So, okay. This is if you're up for it.
Yeah, go for
it. Hey, world. Hey, Japan. We haven't talked to you specifically for a while.
Yeah, they stopped listening to us.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
Now it's Germany who likes to listen to us.
Here's how we resolve our conflicts. Okay. So, yeah. So I did think you used ChatGPT.
Right.
And I don't care. I actually, as I just told you before we were on air, I just thought to myself, why am I not using ChatGPT for these reports?
Yeah.
But I think I just sent back like something about, it was probably a fragment of a sentence about ChatGPT with a little wink face.
Yeah, well, you said we could write the Village does on ChatGPT or something.
Did I? Oh man,
it felt like a little bit.
You felt like
it
was a dig. I'd like to read the quote at some point
because
let's assess how it felt. This is a social experiment.
Yeah. Okay.
How it felt from the deliverer versus the receiver.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing.
I think
I don't remember exactly what I said.
Yeah. Oh, let me just.
He's getting there.
Okay, 4 questions. That's where it is. Andy Mission Church says
Butthead Church.
Okay, so big compliment from Andy DeCourt. Big, like, wow, most amazing report ever done by any church. Highly comprehensive, really great.
Why can't you all be like the Village?
Then just one-liner, just use ChatGPT like the Village. Smile, wink. So it was a slight of a dig. If I felt a dig. So I texted you directly. Ouch. I wrote that.
And
And you wrote back, ha, that's a compliment then, smiley face. And then I said, in all seriousness, I wasn't sure what you were trying to say. And then instead of just being like, hey, I just thought it was really cool they used ChatGPT, you went on to the big chat and said, I repent, the Village did not use ChatGPT. I have thought about it, though, so I layered my laziness onto them. So there's the implication that it's a lazy thing.
Oh, no, I screwed that up, too.
So there you go. Exposure. So,
okay.
So for me personally, the hard part is, and I think I've talked about this on Faith Over Breakfast, that I have a pretty severe learning disability.
Yeah.
That affects my ability to write. And I always give people this example so that they understand. One of the ways in testing that you determine this, particularly in language acquisition and writing, is one of the tests they have you say, so they'll say spell January. and you spell January out loud, and you spell it correctly. And then they say, write January, and you write it down incorrectly.
Oh, interesting.
So you have this disconnect between your language and the way. So, and that they use the months to kind of do this. Because of the way months are spelled. You know how those strange, February.
January is different. Yeah.
And February in particular. So anyway.
February. Yeah.
So they use that. So I have a pretty severe learning disability. Yeah. But I love to write. Yeah. But my writing is just terrible. It really is. So for the longest time, my chat GPT was my wife. Yeah. So I had to wait for her.
Wife GPT.
Yes. And I would dictate things that were really important to write to the village or to other places. So I dictate them. I dictated most of my papers in college once we were married to her, and she read them. Oddly enough, I would get C's on my papers, and then when she started writing them, basically as I dictated to her, I would get A pluses, and people would ask for them to be published, and then I'd have to say I don't want to publish this. Yeah, I don't want to work. So I got a lot of invitations, especially in psychology, to have my papers published and things like that. Yeah. Which I all turned down because I was like, well, did I really write this? Yeah. I mean, it's my ideas. ChatGPT over the last year and a half comes along, and I can bang out an entire page. I don't have to actually self-correct. Right. And then the beauty is I have a prompt that tries to hold my language to closest to my voice and my way of speaking, but fixes most of it. The beauty of that report is then I can have it do that, and then I just tell it, spit it out into a report, and it spits it out into like bullet points and everything.
So I just a quick clarifier. Yeah. You did use ChatGPT.
I did. So I did use ChatGPT, but I wasn't trying to imply to you that I didn't. I just wanted to say I wrote it. ChatGPT did not write this.
So then I took it. I was pretty sure you used ChatGPT, but then when you said that, I was like, all right, like if I believe my friend. If he didn't write it with ChatGPT, so then this is, I'm like going like, whoops, correct in the email, and then throwing in the word laziness. And now here's why. For me, what I like about ChatGPT is I am a big believer. I like to write, and You're is something that comes more naturally to me.
Oh, I envy people like you.
And
I envy. Even say I'm jealous, which is a sin.
Well, right? Yeah, sure. I can be jealous. I have ways in which I am jealous of you.
Awesome, that's good.
We have our shared jealousies. Yeah. What's the reverse of that? That's an interesting thought. What do you do if you know each other and you have a shared jealousy? How can that move toward cooperation?
Yeah, there you go.
So for me, I just wrote. Submitted an article for something, and I'm doggedly committed to doing this with no support tool other than, I actually like using something like Hemingway that catches my passive voice, but then I go rewrite it, But so that's for writing, but then I like using ChatGPT for stuff like, I was just saying, I had to do sermon critiques for a class, and I used drive time, and I spoke them into the ChatGPT thing and said, clean this up and make it an academic voiced response. And then I looked at that, changed a few words that I would never use in my life, and submitted it. I was like, that's awesome. But that, to me, was that laziness? I don't know if laziness probably isn't even the right word, but it's an efficiency tool to make things that I'm not being graded on my voice. This isn't supposed to be creative writing. Yeah. So if it captures my thought, I think it's an awesome tool for that. So I actually didn't have any negative connotation on you using it. I just found it when I replied, and I shouldn't have done it. I should have thought, because I do know this about you. I should have thought and gone, okay, I know Eric used ChatGPT, but he just got complimented on his report, and I do know that all those things are things you do. Sure. Like, that was all real information. So I should have just gone like, in my mind, it's funny that our guy in Phoenix is like, wow, Eric's report. And I know, ChatGPT is part of what organized it so cleanly and everything. Right. Whatever. But I make my stupid little, this is one of classic Andy foot and mouth stupid moments where I just have to like throw it out there and didn't think, oh, how's this going to impact my friend?
Sure.
You know, and I blew it, man. I do repent. I really do. Cause I want to slow down and think, how does this land instead of just knee jerk? Here's my thought.
Yeah.
I want to slow down responses.
Well, I totally appreciate that.
So,
man, thank you.
Sure.
It's good people can hear us work it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you know, my wife always says so she sees it because what she's watched is a person who's gone from really struggling to write out their ideas to, I just finished my second like meditation.
Yeah.
So I wrote 52 pages, 18,000 words. I wrote all the words.
Yeah.
But because the ideas can be cleaned up because the sentences, because I have such a hard time constructing sentences that aren't super run-on sentences or are fragments. I do a lot of fragment sentences.
I'm just the comma king. You can talk to Jill Sommitz. I put a comma. I wrote her a thank you card for editing the book with Rod and I. And I think I put thank, comma, you, comma. I just to mess with her because
right.
She was just like, oh, come on. And then I told her, and this is my embarrassment, I said, I didn't go to college.
Well, you did go to college. You have a bachelor's degree, right?
No, I do not.
You have a master's. You did one of those master's things.
I have a master's degree because I had a late in life call that allowed me to enter into a seminary. And then because of that, I'll have another one someday, probably. But I didn't do like the basics of college English, and so I have this gap. I have this weird gap, and so in the worlds I'm in, it is kind of embarrassing that I think I have a decent writing voice and I can organize my words, but I get the technical stuff wrong all the time. Yeah, and I need an editor so bad.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, like. It's enabled me to do that.
Yeah.
So she calls it my prosthetic leg. She's like, look, you are just missing a leg.
Yeah.
And it serves as a prosthetic leg for you. And it's been a blessing to us and our community. Yeah. And so like.
And Sue's like, man, I don't have to write all these.
Right. But there is this thing like in college and everywhere, like you can't, I mean, I'm actually pretty proficient with ChatGPT. Yeah. You can't get it to write it. You can get it to write you a C paper, but not of anything of any length.
Right.
You have to be able to write, at least put your ideas on a piece of paper, and then be able to edit what it's helping you structure. Now the report thing's nice because when you have that whole structure, you just but we've been doing that before ChatGPT came around. We're using helps for everything, you know. I mean, that's what PowerPoint, Word.
Well, and look, my reports,
illustration.
I built a template for classes reports,
right?
And I just recycle the same, so I'm not starting from absolute scratch. Yeah. Because as much as I guess I'm trying to say like how well the report is written, the only point of that is to make it easier for the other person to digest, so they get the report. I mean, this isn't. You like using a help on something like that is great. Like that's the time.
Yeah, and I a lot of times what we do, the way we do the reports at our churches, that Mark and I and what other pastors are present in the meeting will just dictate to Mark.
Yeah,
and he'll write the answers down. Yeah. But I felt this time, Mark was super sick and. That I want to do a comprehensive report in a way that everybody could kind of see, well, this is exactly how we do it at the village. Like you want to know how it is. Well, this is the philosophy and this is why we do what we do. And to give them a bigger window into it. So
Eric,
that's why I did that.
It was a great report.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And this episode is brought to you by ChatGPT. Can I tell you my favorite thing to do with ChatGPT? I'm just a dweebus. I just want it to make funny pictures.
You get to do it.
I think they're hilarious. We made meal team. I did meal team posters for our meal teams at church, and they're so funny because I did one was like, we have this Canadian couple that's in town for a while, and they took over a meal team because somebody else had a baby, and so we gave the meal team a new name for them, and I said something about a Canadian kitchen or whatever, but the guy likes to hunt, and so I put in all these details. Well, one of the pans, the frying pans on the wall, has like a gun handle. Like it got all confused, you know. The generator is like, is this a gun or a pot? And it just kind of made a gun pot.
Awesome.
And so I think that stuff's funny. And then
here's how I like to use it for humorous ways like that is we get probably, I would say, I don't know, 3 times a week, either Faith Over Breakfast, The Village, or Healing the City, get these notices from the fake Facebook people saying that we violated some copyright. So I just have Chat GPT. I'll say, hey, here's what's happened. Write me a legal response in pirate voice. Or as in, you know, so I have just, and then I just, now that I have about 4 or 5 custom ones, I just send them to them over and over and over again.
Oh
so
my gosh. That's funny.
Pretty hilarious.
Okay.
So there you go.
So
the real subject.
No, you know what? This is a dual subject podcast. The first half brought to you by ChatGPT. Unofficially, they have no. We'll send if they say we violated anything by mentioning them, we will send them a pirate response built by them.
Yes.
To respond. So okay.
Yeah.
Second part of this episode is brought to you by Stability.
Stability.
There probably is a brand called Stability out there, and we probably just violated something in regard to them. So sorry, we'll send you a response too, made by ChatGPT. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about how people are responding to things and the ways that people are gathering together and what they're running to right now. In fact, I had a discussion with one of my classmates about this. So there are a few phenomena, like the older faith traditions,
like the Orthodox Church, big movements towards the Orthodox Church.
And Catholicism again and stuff. So there's that. But then I have also noticed, because I have because of our store and my old business, this eye on like the aesthetic movements and design movements. And they all seem to have the same theme, that things that are old, that are, people are collecting again. They're, ties to the past, keeping things, things that remind you of your grandparents, whether that's for the wealthy, it's the yachts. For the poor, it's grandma chic. For those in the middle, it's maximalism. It just seems like a cultural trend that is not just religious. So I've heard a few people say it's really exciting that people are coming back to the old religious things. And I've thought, yeah, it is, but this is a cultural response, I think. And at the core of it, the simplest way I can put it, that in my opinion, is it's a longing for stability, a grasping for stability. And I actually think it's the same thing that leads people to support Donald Trump, because he is for whatever you might think of what he says and does, he says it in a way that he is sure, and he will do things and knows what to do. And I think that it's all the same thing going on. And frankly, I think people that would have voted for Kamala Harris had a similar desire. Like, let's leave it alone. Let's keep it calm. But it was like this deep longing for stability that it's that we're grasping at. And I've noticed people running from things when they feel unstable, running to things that feel stable. And I think some of it is good and some of it is a problem, because I think that because there's sin in the world, nothing we run to will turn out to be that stable. Even the Orthodox Church. Right. Even, whichever candidate, you could fill your house with grandma's stuff and you're still there. And so I've seen it as grasping for something that is good, but without a stable God. it's going to fall short and people are going to be disenfranchised again. Anyway, that's my thought. That's the thought behind that little mini article thing.
I think that,
and you referenced it in your sermon, which
I think the conversation about stability is not a new one.
No,
I mean, I think, I would say almost 20 years ago, we're talking about the vow of stability.
On Christ the solid rock I stand.
Yeah, there you go.
All other ground is shifting.
Right, yeah. There's things like that, but there's, there is a Catholic, there are many Catholic communities that take the vow of stability.
Yeah.
That comes out of one of the vows of the Benedictine community. So stability is a big thing. I mean, I remember if Weber's book, Ancient Future Faith, takes this idea that people are looking back to something that has stability and a long kind of history, but then also wanting it to be into the future. Like, what does that mean? So,
and I think there's, again, that there is something to historicity. There is something to things that have lasted. I'm not discounting this at all.
Oh, no. Yeah. I mean, and I think like our culture, at least in its, though there's been a lot of upheaval, I would say prior to like the 90s, there was still a stability within families.
Yeah.
And,
gosh, right.
And
And
so that's a big part of like when you don't have stability in family. And like my daughter would always say, Dad, like, you don't realize, but like you guys are just an anomaly.
Yeah.
Well, my friends their parents are divorced.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't, for a long time, she didn't have any friends whose parents were together. Like she was the oddity. All her friends liked to come over to our house because they thought, much to her chagrin at times, that her parents were cool just because we would hang out with them and ask them questions about their life. And we didn't spend a ton of time with them, but we were just there and we were stable. We had them for dinner.
They knew if they came back, you'd be there.
Yeah.
Which, we right in this room represent the truth in the church, that the church has, doesn't always, like, the culture affects the church. Like, I have not had that story entirely, periodically, but not entirely.
Right.
And it's, and so it is, it's increasingly rare. And if you think about, this sounds very like James Dobson of me or something, but I do believe this is true, that the foundational, and I think you could make this argument from Christianity, and I think you could make this argument anthropologically, that the institution number one is the family.
Yeah.
That all other institutions descend from the institution of the family.
And here's the odd thing. I would add to that, and this is, people always look at me weird, but I think it's the family and the meal that always make, like, from Christianity and from just an anthropological idea, perspective, is that's what creates stability. The more the unit sits around food and eats, the more stable it is. And we know that from all the data, because, sociologists have traced like the number of times that you sit down to eat dinner, and then the success of your children is just ridiculous, right? And so,
great, thanks for bringing that up. We don't ever sit down for dinner.
Part of what you do at Mission and why we do the meal at the village is the meal is what bonds. The meal, food disarms you.
Yeah,
food is a dependent thing. Like, we all need it.
Yeah.
It's to survive. So we're eating something that we need to survive. It's symbolic to the meal, which is why you and I, we always have communion in our communities every week, because the meal afterwards is linked to the meal during.
Yeah.
And these two things tell us we survive together. Like, the stability comes out of a meal, our neediness for both salvation, but then in the immediate, we can't survive without food and water.
It's funny because what I just said, and we do it better at our church than in our home with the meal, and I'm just thinking about it, like, so my wife grew up in a home with very successful professional parents, and other people made the food, and so there was never this like joy or there was an enjoyment of food. In fact, like her brother really loves to cook, but it didn't come from. It came from outside.
Right.
And so I think that that sense of like making the food yourself is like, was not built in. It's hard. It's a stretch. It feels like stressful there. In my family, we had the lower income longing to not be poor version of that, which was where you dealt with jealousy of people who you perceived as getting to, go just like buy fancy food. And so you bought crummy fast food out to your detriment, monetarily and health-wise, to try to feel better about yourself. And I see this work out all the time, but I mean, I know that's how it felt for me. It felt like when we got that, little kids meal at McDonald's, it felt like I wasn't poor right now because we got to go out to eat. And so the like joyful experience to me, and it's still in there, it is still ingrained in me, is like going out feels better. And that, has not, it's interesting to think about because I've thought about it usually from a stewardship perspective where I'm like, I just need to go home and like make a sandwich. And I'll be like super proud of myself when I like go home and I just make the like tuna fish sandwich.
Right.
And usually by myself.
Right.
But I'm just like, okay, I didn't eat out for lunch. Good job. Okay, sweet. But yeah, that is so interesting to think through because I think you're right. And I think I look at our family and we get excited about like, okay, we're going to go get some food somewhere or we're going to pick up food and eat it at home.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I do in counseling and marriage counseling is, I mean, especially when you have children and we're working through issues, it's still one of my assignments are, how do we structure your house and the schedules so that you're eating 2 to 3 times a week together?
That's good.
Because it builds community for your family. Because when people are eating, and children in particular, will slip up and they'll tell you what they think about something, right? Or that they were trying not to say. Or they'll just get comfortable and then they'll start talking about their day and you get clues into life that you wouldn't ordinarily get. And you also get to share, you have to set the table and you have to, do the dishes and prepare the food. So you're all in that process together and learning how to work together. It does so many of the family dynamics get worked out at the dinner table.
It's good. I think that's part of what spooks me. I think like when I think about it, it's like the idea that if you're not in, and this is how I think about it in our family's life, like because it's a stressor, that process of like making the food, sitting down adds like an element of like work and stress that would be, I think I'm wrong, but that's like a fear would be like, ooh, that might not be as good as grabbing that salad from Salad and Go. But it's interesting as I'm thinking about this. I'm like, oh, maybe this is a second half of life exploration for me to like grow into that because I actually do like to cook personally, but I didn't grow up with the habit and or valuing it enough. So I'll tend to think it'd be better to get another 30 minutes of work done and get home at this time rather than think, oh, it's time to prep a meal.
Right.
That'd be a cool thing to move toward. But I think you're onto something. That's interesting. So stability of family rhythms.
Yeah.
Including meal time.
Well, here's so the whole missional philosophy like that I grew up in and was discipled in, and then if anybody knows about Soma, the Soma world, like those guys doing mission, like they do it all around the meal.
Yeah.
And their argument is that if your family does the meal and your family's on mission, then the meal's the place you do mission. So you can have people over because you have the routines, and people aren't doing it. So they get to experience something really rich and good, and then you can quickly form community. Yeah. It's like one of the traditional things that we do in our house when people come over, and sometimes it's more natural when they're not over, is that we just do highs and lows. So we go around the table and talk about what highs and lows are. Well, that creates future conversation around, and around whatever it is that we do talk about afterwards. And so those are good things. They're easy. They don't take a lot of training. You don't need to train people to sit at a table. I mean, they need to learn some things, but
does it help if you're a good cook?
no, it doesn't really matter.
I would think it would. I would think if the soup came out and it just sort of tasted like, a potato had been in water, it'd be different.
Well, here's the trick. You just put a little bit of soy sauce on the table or a little bit of hot sauce, and people can doctor it. The thing is people don't, as long as they're not allergic to it or they're not hyper picky people just like that you prepared something. And you could make a cheese sandwich and they're super happy.
You know what, Eric? I can make a mean grilled cheese.
Yeah.
Actually, I do enjoy. I enjoy cooking on all levels. I just don't do it.
If you went to Costco and you bought pre-made lasagnas and you got some pre-made salad mix and you invite people over and you set a table and you cook, you put it in your oven, and it's hot food, then it's a beautiful, hospitable thing. It's about sitting and sharing a meal. And I think that's the big part.
Do you think, Rod has talked about this before, and I think this is true, and I think I will speak mostly for myself, suffer from this. There's this myth that to be hospitable is to nail it. Like the meal is incredible and your home is in perfect shape. Like Martha Stewart. And I think that, to me, I think my family never had people over for food.
Right.
Ever.
Because people are very ashamed of their homes.
We were extremely ashamed of our home, especially where we lived, in the mobile home on the dirt road, or in the trailer park.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. But so therefore I cannot recall a time, I can't remember us ever having anybody over for dinner. Ever.
Well, and it's become less and less too.
Right. So you were formed, and I know this because I've been to your parents' house, and almost every time there was a meal that I ate with them.
Yeah, they loved hospitality.
So I did not see this lived out at all.
Right.
At all. But we would go out for Thanksgiving. Yeah. We would go out if we could for Thanksgiving. So where was I going with that? Oh, hospitality. So there's this myth, the Martha Stewart myth. And so when Rod's talked about that, I've thought, man, I grew up under that myth entirely as a poor person, which was because you don't have that, you're not doing it. You're lucky if you get invited to that and go enjoy it. That's going to be great, but you can't offer it. You can't, you won't, and I think it's bogus, because I've experienced good hospitality in a one-room shack in Nogales on one of those hills on the Mexico side. I had wonderful food there, and I've experienced, and some of the times I've experienced it most is when somebody who you view as having very little. And refugees are so good at this. So
but it comes from their culture, and the family has a higher value.
They were taught, yeah. But that hospitality doesn't depend on having it all together and having all the things. It comes from the care. But I was not formed in this at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in my mom's era, in my dad's era, people were hospitable. They may not have always had people over for dinner, but they had, had dessert. Always was ready for someone to come over. Right? There was always a cake there. There was always something ready that you had when people knocked on the door. People would sit out on the porch and might have dessert together. Like the families were eating together more often.
There was definitely more. It's a bit generational, because I'm thinking I know a decent amount about my parents, and I think they dealt with the same shame.
Sure,
because they were both
the clean house, the perfectly hospitable. Yes, there were rules, and you follow those rules.
Well, but my mother's family, like they moved west because of the Dust Bowl and lost everything, and dealt with a lot of shame, right? And they were one of the few that didn't have indoor plumbing and stuff like that. So I don't hear her talking about them. Now, I think they ate meals together because, they couldn't afford the alternative, which is probably where her sense of joy was, when she went and got a master's degree and became a business owner and could go out to eat.
Yes.
Unlike her before. But and then for my dad's parents, they would make a Thanksgiving meal that they would have the family over, but I don't recall them ever having now I would bet that neighbors could drop by, and my grandma, when she was with us, would have taken care of people and stuff. But it seems like my parents were second generation moving away from that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we can't say it was all a universal experience. We can't trace sociologically that less and less people are eating dinner together.
For sure.
Less and less are going to to bowling clubs and
this is Robert Putnam and the movie Join or Die that's come out.
Yeah,
and
there's just gotten worse and worse.
There's more social isolation.
Yeah.
And that leads to less stability. Yeah.
Which is why, so when the Village was started, and like about 3 years in, and we were packed full of college students, there's this now almost legendary moment where I stand up in a congregational meeting, so not just a church meeting, and preach this sermon, so to speak, on Jeremiah 29, talks about living in exile, connected us to being sojourners in this world, but that the city is our city. And so I encourage people to settle down, get married, plant gardens, marry their kids to one another, like be a city within the city, take Tucson as a place that one person at a time we're going to offer the goodness of things. But that means that you're inviting people into a life of hospitality and into a life of inviting people in.
Here's a church question. So do you think, as you're raising up leaders in the church, and you're hearing me admit, like I'm coming into this ministry without a background in hospitality. So I'm not saying you can't be in ministry.
Right.
God uses broken people all the time.
Praise God.
Praise God. And thank God for the people in our church who do bring that gift, because we would not be what we are. They round us out. Our family brings a gift, but it wasn't that one.
Right.
But the as I'm thinking about raising up leaders, I'm thinking we often look for people who have answers and who are bossy or whatever.
Yeah.
Should we be more attentive to looking for people who bring people into their home and who eat together? Yeah. That's and how often is that like how many ordination services do we ask about that stuff? How many, like, when people are being considered to be an elder or deacon?
Well, and I would ask, do you, like, especially with elders, the question is, what's their reputation outside of the church itself?
And that can go a couple different ways, because I think, there would be one version with me where it's like, oh, Andy's got a bunch of buddies out there and connected with ministry people. There's good, could you say good reputation? You could.
Sure.
And then, but there's...
But if somebody were to say, well, how does he treat his wife? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Never been in his house.
Don't go to their house. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's partly something. I think hospitality is a command. I mean, we can trace that out, it's in Hebrews, it's in Romans.
Right.
Like, you don't know who you're entertaining.
Right. Yeah.
I think one of the things that we do at the Village, and we're working through this year-long training, and one of the trainings we're going to work on is what kind of hospitality is authentic to you. Because what's authentic to me in hospitality may not be authentic to you. And I think that's the question you have to ask. So for some people, maybe inviting a bunch of people over to their house for dinner it's just not who they are. It's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean they aren't allowed. They are like, well, that's just not me, so I'm not going to be hospitable.
Right. You find your ways.
Right. So hospitality is me taking something I have and inviting you into it in a way that's going to nurture relationship with you and help you feel welcome.
Yeah.
So that can happen in a lot of ways. I mean, but it's still, maybe it's just like, man, you like inviting people out for coffee and you buy their coffee for them and then you would hang out with them. Well, that's a way of being hospitable.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think when I think about us, like, that's, for me, it'd be like, let's meet over some food that or coffee, and I love I love taking people to an event.
Yes.
And so like join me at a concert or a baseball game, and I'm increasingly enjoying hosting them for that.
Yeah.
Not just I'll see you there, but like, hey, I got a couple tickets. Do you want to come? And I see that as a version of hospitality. But then I think there's other dynamics that are always at play. Like there's brokenness in the world, right? Like there's introversion, there's extroversion, there's like various other things where not everybody's going to be able to do the same level. So the comparison game can be problematic.
It is problematic. And so kind of for me, when it comes to teaching and thinking about hospitality, first off, I would say so if you are a family, having hospitality within your family is what you develop, meaning what does it look like for us to be hospitable? That could be we order a pizza and we always watch the U of A game together, and it's a big thing. But I do still think eating together is a big part of it, and it's the training ground. It's like the arithmetic of hospitality. You might get to the place where you're not always using, adding and subtracting and dividing. You may be beyond that, or that's not part of your life. But you need to have that as a basic rhythm to help train you. And then after that, you should, at some time, 1, 2, 3 times a year, have someone in your home.
Yeah.
Even if it's super awkward for you, because it's good. It's a good learning experience.
Yeah.
And a good training.
I know for us that we usually don't regret it, but when we have people in our home, it's a long, hard day. Like that's a hard truth. Like it's a bummer, but it's like, because there's a lot of, from our various backgrounds, like there's a social pressure that you feel whether it's right or not. There's the extra load that it takes, whether you should feel it or not. It's real.
Right. And I think that's part of the larger community is to begin to help people break that up and create a culture where that's not as difficult to do.
Yeah. And where you can bring your strengths and stuff. Sometimes I think for even like, I think my wife and I are best when we meet people out, because that pressure's alleviated. We're able to be more present.
Sure.
And, kind of knowing, I guess I'm putting this out there for the failed and flawed like me, but just to say like,
failed and flawed.
I know, but just to say, like knowing your story helps, right? And knowing like, I can press against this, but maybe I don't need to become 100%. Like maybe I dip my toes and I learn, and then I also like do the version I can do more comfortably as well, so that I don't. Because if you try, like if everybody goes out there and they're like, I'm gonna be Eric and Sue, like that for some people could just be a bar they can't reach.
Yeah, I think the part for me is yes and no, right? Because discipleship is inviting people to imitate you. Yeah. But imitate you in an authentic way to them. Yeah. So you have to kind of sort through that part. I would say that in this day and age where we're talking about stability, and you're talking about calling leaders, probably you want to focus on leaders who are within their homes and families producing stability and are willing to welcome people into that. That's the kind of leader you're looking for in this day and age, because people who are younger in particular, but I would argue now older as Gen Xers move into their 50s, like really long for stability and just eat up an opportunity to eat dinner and to have dessert and to laugh together and play a game or have someone ask into their life, right? That this is what they're in a home that feels safe, where they have to ask, where's the bathroom? And they can open the fridge and learn where the cups are. Like that's a big deal to people and so healing.
I just, one of my classmates, we did this ministry tour last week, in Phoenix. And there was a lot of, I think this is an unfortunate byproduct of it, because you always go to the low income areas and see the amazing ministry that's going on there. Right. And then we did go to a high income area, and there was a certain amount of like angst, and I felt a little bit of it. Like I remember I felt this exactly. I wish this much intentionality could go into the low income community. That'd be, and I'm stating that more as a longing. I wish it were. I'd love to see it. It's hard because the high income community creates its own resource pool.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I sensed in some of our classmates some shame around having means, and dealing with that and kind of feeling like bad about it because like, oh, I live in the nice neighborhood. So one of the ladies had said something like, oh, I gotta have a really nice house. It's not even what I want. It's just, and you could tell there was like some, like, I'm sorry kind of stuff going on, but then mentioned that there was this person that had, that they'd invited to come live with them because they had a lot of room and that she just wanted to be there all the time. Mm-hmm. And that she was always wanted to come over and, have food. And I thought about it and I thought, yeah, because actually a lot of people who are in what I grew up in poverty, there's a gift in the community where you're not fretting about money all the time. My family was worried about money all the time, constantly, even though we were spending too much of it on silly stuff sometimes, but we were worried about it. And that stress was part of why we went and ate out, was because that made us feel better for a second. But there's this, if I'd had a wealthy friend, and I did in a way have friends who I could go, even my friend who I'm going to do the book about, his home, I could ride my bike over there, walk in the door without knocking. If I needed, I knew where the cups were, and I did enjoy that experience. My parents were wonderful. Like it wasn't like I couldn't be at home, but something about their slightly wealthier home, it was frankly, even thinking of stability, attached to the ground. It was gonna be there. Mine might not. Mine could roll. Yeah. Mine could be pulled to the dump if it wears out. There was something about that place and that some of that came from their affluence. And I think when we shame affluence, we miss the opportunity in it to offer to people what there's a genuine longing for.
Yeah, and I think as someone, I take very seriously most of the time when I'm capable of the rich young ruler, because my house and whatever wealth I have, it's not mine, and I really have to be able to share it. I can enjoy it, and one of the things that I always try to tell people, and it's not my own, is that if you live in the first world and you have the first world benefits, don't be ashamed of your first world problems. Because those are your problems. Yeah. But your job in your first world problems and in your first world life is to not hold so tightly to everything, but to be ready to give it and to let it be used and to get it dirty and messed up and be willing to do the extra work to get it back to where it needs to be so people can use it. Because your wealth is given to you not for you. It's given to you certainly that you can benefit off of it, but that it's to be shared with the people around you. And it's so hard to do that. And I think partly there is that thing of like, okay, because I grew up my mom, who was very much like, we have to clean like company's coming, which we don't do at my house. Yeah. We straighten up like company's coming, which takes 10 minutes.
But we don't have to be perfect here.
And you wipe it down to make sure there's no pee stains. Right? Yeah. And that there's a towel so they can dry their hands. It's not advanced, So I think that shifted from that
makes you able to be more
present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where like anyway.
On the other hand,
I understand. Yeah.
Is we feel like, oh no, but I don't want that to get messed up.
Right.
Like I don't want the kids running around there or pulling that thing and getting it. You better be willing to have everything broken, everything scratched, everything looking like it's not new and pretty. Yeah. And then once you're there, afterwards, okay. Yeah. You can clean it up. Maybe you fix that scratch. Maybe God's gracious and gives you a new table because somebody cranned it, or put a marker on it, whatever.
The other interesting thing, and maybe this will be the closer, is you're absolutely right. We've actually experienced seasons of that. I should say, like, even to my wife's credit, like we had a season of way more people in our home. And I think we went through a lot. Frankly, like we went through some really hard stuff, and like part of that was, we kind of got weary, and so I have hope that we'll
head back.
We'll have another season, but but there is you're right. Like during those times, you just have to embrace. We had, something in our house is cracked to this day because someone cracked it, right? And that's just. Oh, it's like my phone. Do you ever get your phone gets hot and you realize the screen's on? I thought that happened. Didn't. But the, we've experienced, and but I don't hate that crack. It's like, it kind of reminds me of a person. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so that's one of the things to embrace is people bring, people break things and homes are to be lived in and used, and it's a good reminder.
It is, and that it's God is going to make all things new, and it's in some ways even just announcing the kingdom is allowing the temporal things to be temporal. I will say just at close, and I think this is why I don't think people understand what Mission Church is trying to do or what the Village is trying to do in its depth. And that is that when you go to church on Sunday and you have these structures and they're very well thought out and each thing is done, what is being modeled for you, including that meal, is what family is supposed to look like. This is what family is. And family has these times where the kids are taught. And family has these times where we do this learning together and this refocusing of ourselves towards Jesus and not on the family problems. And we eat together. And I think that is what's trying to be communicated. The meal's linked to that, but every well thought out thing is not so that we could be different. It is to build a stability, to model for people what home should be, what the mission looks like, and how we are in this recentering rhythm. And so when the Village says it's neo-monastic, which I would argue so is mission, this is the monasticism. We are teaching you, we're modeling it in order that you might practice these things over and over again in your own home and in your own communities.
It's totally true. And it's funny because I think the difference, I think as I and other leaders have thought through this at Mission, I would just say I'm on the learning curve with our church. But we're creating things that I want to form, things that I look and I say, I don't think I was formed by this in the church or necessarily in my home. And I'm still on the front edge of that. Right. And I'm inviting people to learn with me. And maybe you got to see a little more of that at home. But but all of us are saying, let's be formed together into some new things.
And but you got the elements in there. So now you're just working on how to creatively engage those elements in front of people. And learning what it looks like. After 25 years, we're doing the same still.
Yep. Well, sweet. We better wrap it up because I've got to roll.
You've got to rock and roll.
Thank you for listening in. You can always send us a question through the text opportunities in your podcast app or to faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com, or you can talk to Eric at church. If you talk to me, I will forget. So you've got to email or send the thing. Or if you do talk to me, include a Post-it note that you stick onto my computer. Then it might make it all the way. That would help.
And so just as an ending, and then you've already heard this at the beginning, so I'll say it twice, is we'd love you to be on our social media team, which is real simple. When you see the Faith Over Breakfast thing pop up on your Facebook, just share it.
Or if you listen to here's what I do. If you listen to the podcast and you're kind of intrigued by it, screenshot it and put it on your story with a link to it.
Perfect.
Make a huge difference for us.
Be our social media team.
What an opportunity.
There you go.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.